I want to talk about why guilds are so special in MMOs, and I think that if you've never joined one, you should at least try it once or twice if you plan on playing MMORPGs for a while. Most of the footage shown is from Star Wars: The Old Republic, as it's my first main MMO, and while I don't play daily anymore, I've accepted the fact that I will probably always play it until I can't anymore. This isn't a SWTOR video, rather it's a video about a key feature in the genre that SWTOR is in, therefore lots of SWTOR footage. If you've never seen The Guild with Felicia Day, I highly recommend you take some time and give it a watch. While pretty much everything in that show is exaggerated for entertainment purposes, the bones of the show are pretty accurate. A group of people from either all over the world or, in the show's case, a local guild who met up for the first time in episode 1. I started playing MMOs over 15 years ago. I didn't play with a lot of friends. None of the friends I had IRL played these types of games, so I didn't really have anyone early on. One of the things that drew me to MMOs was the massively multiplayer aspect. Even though WoW at this point was already the dominant game in the genre, I never played because my parents thought it was evil or something, but a young NoblePlays didn't really care. I was so captivated by the idea of meeting new and interesting people all over the world. I'm sure every generation has similar versions of what I'm about to say, but the internet was so much cooler back then. The concept of interacting with someone in Tokyo and Australia at the same time was mind-blowing for a kid like me who lived in a rural town. The first MMOs that I played were the LEGO Group's LEGO Universe and Cartoon Network's Fusion Fall. I played almost exclusively solo in those games because my parents wouldn't let me talk to anyone. But that all changed when I turned 14 and Star Wars: The Old Republic released. I'm sure all of us remember the launch of our favorite MMO. You remember loading into a starting area for the first time, unsure of where to go or what to do. Combine that with thousands of other people loading in at the same time, it was just a special moment. I was fortunate enough to have a few IRL friends who started SWTOR with me. I guess that was technically my first guild, but that didn't last long. After about 4 months, they left to go back to Halo or a faster paced game. So there I was, alone in a galaxy and needing to find new people to adventure with. I cannot stress this enough, but playing with other people really was a focus of the genre in the early years, and there were, and still are, a lot of benefits to doing so. I found my friends in-game through grouping up in flashpoints. I decided it would be a good idea to level as a mercenary, as they can heal and DPS. So it was pretty easy to get pops while leveling because back then, SWTOR relied heavily on the holy trinity of MMOs, tank, DPS, and healer. I was invited to a guild by someone who appreciated my healing in a hard mode flashpoint, and that was when my guild journey really started. This was before I was able to get into voice chat programs like Vent, Raid Call, Mumble, or TeamSpeak. Yes, I have used all of those services. But before I could use any of that, I exclusively communicated with my guildmates in the in-game chat. I don't think people realize how cool that was back in the day, and I think some people forget the benefits of using guild chat over voice comms. I was recently running a flashpoint in SWTOR with 3 random players, and we were talking about how awesome it was that Disney hadn't really touched the Old Republic era. We were also making jokes about Darth Malgus and camera angles. It was a whole thing. That was all done in the flashpoint group chat. After it was all over, I thanked everyone for the run and was on my way. I've done that flashpoint probably 500 times over the 13-year span of the game, but the only runs of it that I remember are when I had text chat conversations with other people. There was just a magic to being social in that particular way. Anyway, back to guilds. I think a lot of people forget, or maybe they just don't know how impactful guilds were, in that they created a third space for people who may not have had great social prospects in the real world. If you're watching this and have only grown up with the internet, third spaces are just areas where people can gather, usually over a common interest, think a bookstore or something like that. These third spaces really dominated the early to late 2000s and started to fade away in the 2010s because of the explosion of social media. I will always enjoy getting together with my friends and my community, but I didn't always have that. And that's where guilds really helped me develop social skills and other valuable attributes. To this day, I'm still more of an introvert, but I enjoy being around people a lot more than I used to. Not only do guilds provide a social outlet, they also have a sense of community and belonging. I think all of us can admit that we joined that one guild and we felt at home.
That's how we'll do this.
Who's tanking, what's his face?
All me, baby.
My mom can take all you bitches.
I remember finishing school, running downstairs, and logging on to my mercenary. And the moment that I loaded into the planet that I was questing on, I would see the guild chat light up with people being friendly and happy to see me online. And that was a big deal for me as a young teenager who didn't normally get that reception outside of the game. I do want to take this time and address some of the people who may have social anxiety and find the concept of guilds to be a little bit daunting. I've found that in using the guild chat feature, it helps with that a little bit. I know that people enjoy playing MMOs solo, but still need to access things that guilds provide. There are plenty of casual, friendly guilds out there that are happy to take in players who just need to join for a specific thing. My challenge, though, for you is to at least try to make one friend during your time there and see what happens. I think you would genuinely be happy with what you find. Guilds of today aren't like the guilds of the past. This seems obvious, but I wanted to explain why. While guilds are a great place to make friends and come together over a shared goal or interest, they also can lead to less than pleasing experiences. Over the years, I have noticed that guilds advertise in increasingly smaller niches. It used to be the classic RP, PvE, PvP, or casual recruitment. Now it seems like there are all these rules attached that make guilds less appealing. At least to me. You either must have Discord or whatever voice comm they use, you must log in X times a week or you risk being kicked out, or they just have a lot of subjects that you're not allowed to talk about in guild chat or voice chat if you're on the server. We are now more divided than ever before as individuals. People in friend groups are happy to drop you from their lives or guilds just because you have a different take on life than they do. I was heavily involved in guilds during the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections here in the United States, and I remember having a lot of open discussions with my guildies about the outcome of both elections. While a lot of us differed on who we voted for and our political opinions, I wasn't old enough to vote at that point, they didn't divide us as a guild. Whether we agreed or disagreed, we all recognized that we were all people who lived in different places and have had very different life experiences. This is something I value a lot, as being in a guild with people who are from all walks of life helped shape my worldview as a teenager. It made me appreciate the differences in others. No matter where we came from, we all united under one banner. And it was our love for Star Wars: The Old Republic and the many quests and raids we would progress through together. I'm not oblivious to the fact that people use video games and MMOs in particular as an escape from the real world, so I can understand the reasoning why some guilds ban talking about things like politics in chat where there may be lots of people present, but to me it still seems a little strange, and maybe that's because of my personal experience being in guilds that didn't really ban any type of conversation. I guess I just think that it's important for people to feel like they can talk about what they want with their friends and not feel like they're at risk of being ostracized. This isn't to say that you have to bring the real world into games. In fact, I usually err on the side of let games be games and the IRL stuff can be discussed privately. But I think in the case of smaller guilds who end up playing together for multiple years, those things can be talked about and not ruin the fabric of the guild. Some of my most vivid memories of talking to my guildmates was late night mumble and talking about real things. The amount of time someone would come into the channel and tell us about a breakup, I couldn't even count on both hands. It wasn't just bad things in their lives though. We celebrated real-life accomplishments like getting married or getting a well-earned promotion. The MMO itself served as a platform, and we all just lived there. In a way, and for a season, we did life together. I'm sure that there are some guilds out there that still have this type of conversation, but it does seem like most of them are kept to the topic of the game itself or game culture as a whole. And like I said, personally, I find that a little odd, and I understand that many people have no interest in bringing aspects of their real life into a game with them. That makes a lot of sense, because in the game, you're someone else. You don't have the problems that you face every day in the real world. You can be whoever you want, and I think that's an appeal to MMOs for some people. I've talked about many benefits of joining a guild. Are there any negative aspects of joining one? I'd say yes, there definitely is, but I don't think they're unique to MMOs or gaming. I just think it's part of life. I've been in some really solid and inviting guilds, and I've also been in guilds that are a bit more hardcore and not welcoming. You will also have people that make the game their whole identity. I think a lot of us who play games like this can say at one point or another we could find ourselves sliding into this camp, even if it's just temporary. It can really be tough to be in a guild where everything is done super seriously. Running a guild or even being an active member becomes what some players live for. And I'm not saying that this is bad objectively. I have no idea what's going on in the lives of other people, but I think we all have had those guildmates where you just couldn't relax with them. You couldn't just play the game. You had to have the most optimal route or min-maxed gear because you can only have fun if you're efficient at the game. I think now, in the broader sense of gaming, that notion is becoming less and less popular, but in the case of MMOs, it made you just not want to log in. Players like that, while they probably mean well, can end up having the opposite effect on the larger guild. And I'll be the first to say that there's nothing wrong with having appropriate gear for certain activities. It doesn't help anyone to head into a raid, dungeon, or PvP match underprepared. I think most people would be open to learning from someone if the messaging was delivered in a more helpful way. I have been on both sides of this. I have been the casual that just wants to enjoy the game and get better at a slower rate, and I've also been the min-maxer in my younger years. I think most people go through a similar journey. You start out a game and you're bad at it. Then as time goes on, you improve and you learn more. And before you know it, you know all the best gear grinds, XP farms, and boss fights. That's a pretty normal progression, I'd say. I guess somewhere in that journey, people can get consumed by the optimization, and there are definitely players who find pure joy out of playing a game like that. And honestly, who am I to tell you how to enjoy a video game? If that's what you like, it's what you like. What I'm getting at is that sometimes your way to play may not be someone else's way to play, and vice versa. Of course, just like the real world, you'll eventually meet people who you don't really vibe with, and not just like the, oh, he or she is annoying kind of way. You really just can't stand the person, you don't want to be around them. That's part of it all. That's part of socializing and creating community. I think we all are guilty of trying to make our social circles as echo chambery as possible. In a world where algorithms try to predict what you like and who you're most likely to interact with, it can feel like you're only surrounded by people who agree with you, and people who only agree with you aren't your friends. Even though disagreements can be uncomfortable, especially in a guild setting, I did appreciate the back and forth I'd have with people over various things, guild related or not. I think one of the more unfortunate things about the state of MMOs these days is that they really don't rely on guilds in the way that they used to. Not just guilds, but smaller groups that form things like dungeons. A lot of dungeons and flashpoints, at least when it comes to Star Wars The Old Republic, my game of expertise, it can be done solo. This was done to make content more accessible to players who maybe didn't want to join a group but still wanted to experience the story inside the content. While I understand why most people want to do things solo, I will probably always lean towards doing things in groups. Part of the magic of MMOs is doing various activities with other people. Some you may know well, others not so much. I feel like camaraderie in games like this is almost underappreciated. I think it's partially because of how these games are run now, more solo-friendly content, etc. The difficulty in MMOs these days have been drastically reduced as well, and I think that's part of what makes classic versions of games, such as WoW, more enjoyable to people. The difficulty is back, some of the convenience elements have been taken away to maybe force a little bit more thought and planning. You don't have a ton of things to pay to skip, but not to spend too much time on this, but I really think it was a mistake to turn down difficulty in the genre. There's this natural point in MMOs where there's not too much friction for the player, so they obviously don't quit out of frustration, but there's just enough to keep the player engaged. I think once BioWare started making flashpoints soloable and heroic missions require nothing but you and a companion, the built-in friction meant to nudge players together was completely destroyed. Back in the day, players were treated like actual benefits to your gaming experience. Not to say that that never happens today, but it seems like it happens a lot less. At least that's the vibe I get from players in my comment sections of my MMO videos. If you don't need other people, then why go out of your way to make friends or find community? I don't really blame the player for this happening either. With social media platforms and apps like Discord, they have become the main form of guild communication. So not only is the in-game guild chat less active, so is the world chat, and it feels more empty as a result. I think an aspect that also describes this pretty well is the evolution of the daily quest. I can't speak for every MMO, but in SWTOR's first 5 years, daily quests had much more value than they do today. They were the premier way of earning credits, and back when crafting mattered, there used to be high-level resources that you could get in your Flashpoint runs, which you can still get now, it just doesn't seem as impactful. Section X and the Black Hole come to mind a lot in my memories of playing the Old Republic. PvP was always enabled in these zones, and SWTOR didn't have the highest stakes, so even if you were killed by a player from the enemy faction, you didn't lose any progress, you just had to respawn, so you'd usually just want to do things with a few guild members. It was something everyone needed to do in order to earn decent credits and work on reputation and maybe towards some achievements. I would often do dailies with my close friends in the guild, and if someone else logged in and needed to run some on their own again, I'd just switch to another character and run it with them. Personally, I think dailies back then were a good way to give everyone a common goal, and I know that dailies have become basically chores to most people these days, but they didn't used to be so pointless. Dailies have been extended to single-player games. I find that pretty silly, but whatever keeps people playing, I guess. Daily quests today don't really provide you with much reward, so I understand being tired of them. However, I'd make the argument that they lost their appeal when you stopped doing them with friends or other people. I remember loading into the Black Hole or Section X and people actively looking to run daily groups together. You didn't just have to be in a guild. Like I said before, MMOs served as a social platform for many people, so doing daily fetch quests was what you did as a guild. But then as time goes on and the evolution of community and connection continues, doing things like dailies becomes less and less important. But that's enough daily talk for now. So after about 20 minutes of talking about this, I wanted to address the passage of time in these games and what happens when the guild you've spent years playing with finally disbands. What if you're still interested in the game? What if you still enjoy spending time in the world? This is where I find myself these days. I know that my best guild days are very much behind me. The friends I made a decade ago will never measure up to anyone I may meet now, and this is pretty natural as most of my time spent playing MMOs was as a teenager, and I no longer have the same need for that level of social interaction in games. As I've progressed my relationships in the real world, I've got a wonderful wife and great friends in my community that I enjoy spending time with. I think it's important to remember, especially in gaming, that nothing lasts forever. I've asked some old guildies and my community members to share their experiences in their early guilds, so I'll put those up on the screen if you want to read them. But there's one I want to read by my friend Dave, who basically was a second father to me growing up. I was late to the MMO game, especially considering my age. I always played single player and a smattering amount of multiplayer on one particular game. Then I started an MMO and it literally changed my life. It started with DDO and then SWTOR. For once, I wasn't alone. I met like-minded people who enjoyed the same things I did. These friendships have stood the test of time, better than other lifelong ones. It is truly a found family, one I love dearly and would do anything for. I have met people whom I consider my adopted kids and siblings. I wouldn't trade it for the world. People lose interest in the game that brought you together, and that's okay. That's the way life is. And it isn't exclusive to video games either. I've said goodbye to many people that in an earlier point in my life, I would have never thought would ever happen. That was difficult for me, especially as a teenager when I thought nothing else mattered but the video game and the friends I made along the way. I've been in many guilds, but I've accepted the fact that most online relationships do not last forever, especially outside of the game that started the friendships. And that's also okay. Life happens in seasons, and it's important to remember that nothing stays the same, as much as we'd like it to stay just how we remembered it. I feel very fortunate that I've been able to keep up with around 6 people out of the hundreds I've met through the Old Republic, and while I've had great memories with many people, the 6 I speak to once a year or so are the people who have transcended the online barrier. I'm sure that's less common nowadays given the state of the world, so again, I feel very blessed to have people from many years ago that I can still call friends. Even though I don't play SWTOR daily anymore, my wife and I joined a guild that is really welcoming to casual players. I make a point to log in during the weekend and help out new players or just talk to people in guild chat. I don't normally join voice comms unless I'm helping in a raid, and even then I don't really speak that much anymore. I just enjoy listening to the community and being a part of what's going on. It reminds me of the days I would spend being really active and meeting new people and experiencing the wonder that this genre really still does provide if you look hard enough. One of my oldest friends who I met in this game has moved on to playing shooters and other types of games with a new friend group, and every once in a while I'll jump into his Discord and just say hi, and just hang out with the mic muted. Sometimes I get nostalgic and miss the old days, so call me a boomer, I guess. To wrap up this video, I hope I've encouraged you to join a guild in your MMO of choice if you haven't already. Guilds aren't just about raiding or stockpiling resources. They can be a great source of community, family, and friendships. And while it won't last forever, you'll have the memories, and you'll be grateful for them. 2 months ago, I had made a video basically just rambling about how I don't have time to play MMOs daily anymore, and me being okay with that. And here I am talking about a feature of a MMO that I really enjoy and what keeps me playing, even though I don't play every day. I think we all know the emotional relationship we all have with our favorite MMO, or the one that really put us on the map, if you will. You never leave, you just take long breaks. You've seen me use a ton of old clips of raids happening in the Old Republic. It's really just a couple of boss fights that I still have with one of the guilds I'll always remember, the Unmasked Rebellion, and I feel like a boomer constantly using old clips, but it really is something special that I remember as if it just happened yesterday. You know, I could tell you what we were doing that night, I can tell you the date, I can tell you what we were talking about in between boss fights. It just was, it's a memory that I have that I will never forget, and one that I hope some people that I played with all those years ago still remember as well. If you enjoyed this video about guilds, be sure to subscribe. I mostly make videos on my experiences in games, mostly MMORPGs, but I have been making other content about gaming in general and non-MMORPG games, so if that interests you, you maybe want to stick around. But if not, thank you for giving me your time today. I do appreciate it, and I hopefully will see you in the next one.
Trust fall! I didn't see you fall either.
It was too far up, it wouldn't render.
My poor Mandalorian jetpack went, nope.